Discipline does not arrive as freedom. It arrives as weight. A weight on the body when comfort calls louder than duty. A weight on the mind when the ego demands reward before effort. A weight on the spirit when silence feels like punishment rather than power. In the old provinces of Japan, warriors understood this truth long before they ever held a blade. Before strength, there was stillness. Before victory, there was obedience to an unseen path. This story is not about a battle fought in the open. It's about the war that begins in silence, where fear disguises itself as fatigue, where excuses wear the mask of wisdom, and where discipline feels heavy precisely because it is carving space for freedom. Our warrior does not seek glory. He seeks relief from restlessness, from distraction, from the endless hunger of the ego. Under the guidance of a mentor who speaks little and watches everything, he learns that discipline is not a cage. It is a gate. At first, the gate does not open. It resists. It demands consistency without reward, presence without applause, effort without certainty. And that is why most turn away. But those who remain discover a forgotten truth. Discipline only feels heavy until the spirit grows strong enough to carry it. This is a parable of silence over noise, of presence over impulse, of mastery forged through an ancient system the modern world has forgotten. This is the path, and freedom waits on the other side. The young warrior had never lost a battle, yet every morning he woke defeated, not by an enemy with a name or a face, but by disorder within. His days were scattered. Training happened, but without devotion. Rituals were followed, but without belief. Ambition burned hot, yet vanished the moment discomfort appeared. He mistook movement for progress, sweat for discipline, desire for direction. And so discipline felt cruel to him, like a punishment imposed by ancestors who no longer lived in his world. Rules without reward, effort without applause. When he watched others laugh, rest, indulge, he felt envy sharpen inside his chest. They looked free, unburdened, light. What he did not see was their quiet decay. In the ancient system, this stage had a name, the unformed spirit. Not weak, just untrained. Not broken, just scattered. Then the mentor entered his life, not with ceremony, but with absence. The man was already there one morning, sweeping the courtyard stones before dawn. His movements were slow, precise, unnecessary, at least in appearance. When the warrior bowed, the mentor did not return it. When the warrior spoke, the mentor did not answer. Instead, he handed him a task. "Do this," the mentor said. Nothing more. The task was simple, almost insulting. Clean, repeat, stand, breathe, practice the same form again and again and again. No explanation followed. Days passed, then weeks. The warrior's frustration grew louder than his muscles ever did. His body adapted quickly. The mind did not. Thoughts surged during repetition like insects in heat. What is the purpose of this? Why am I being denied instruction? How does this make me stronger? This was the ego speaking in refined language. Modern psychology would call it cognitive resistance, the brain's refusal to invest energy without guaranteed return. The dopaminergic system demands feedback, novelty, reward. When none arrives, irritation masquerades as intelligence. The ancients called it fear. Fear of submission, fear of boredom, fear of being shaped by something greater than preference. The mentor watched everything, corrected nothing. And that, more than harsh discipline, unsettled the warrior. Without feedback, there was nowhere for pride to land. Without praise, no place for identity to rest. The warrior began to feel exposed. Discipline, he realized, was not asking him to do more. It was asking him to stop negotiating. Every morning, a battle occurred before the sun rose. Not between body and task, but between spirit and excuse. Each time he obeyed the ritual without understanding, something inside him resisted, then softened. Microscopically, the brain was changing. Neural circuits reinforced by repetition. Attention narrowing, impulse weakening, but subjectively it felt like loss. Loss of choice, loss of comfort, loss of the illusion of freedom. He wanted answers, philosophy, meaning. What he received instead was presence. And presence, when first encountered, is heavy. As the warrior surrendered to routine, silence began to speak, and what it revealed would unsettle him more than effort ever had. Silence is not empty. It only feels that way to those who have never listened long enough. As the days repeated themselves, the warrior noticed something unsettling. The noise had not disappeared. It had grown clearer. Without conversation, instruction, or distraction, his own mind became impossible to ignore. Thoughts rose uninvited, circling the same questions, the same complaints, the same quiet fears. I'm wasting time. This is beneath me. Real strength should feel powerful, not dull. The mentor remained unmoved. In the old traditions, silence was not the absence of teaching, it was the teaching. Words were considered premature. Instruction given too early fed the ego, not the spirit. The warrior was not being denied wisdom, he was being prepared to receive it. Neuroscience would later validate this approach. When external stimulation is reduced, the brain's default mode network activates, bringing buried insecurities, unresolved fears, and self-narratives to the surface. Most people flee this discomfort. The ancients walked directly into it. The warrior tried to resist at first. He trained harder, faster, louder, but effort could not drown out awareness. One morning, as he swept the stones, his movements faltered, not from fatigue, but from realization. He saw the pattern clearly for the first time. His suffering did not come from the task, but from his constant resistance to it. The weight he carried was not discipline, it was ego. The need to understand before obeying. The desire to feel exceptional rather than consistent. The belief that freedom meant choosing ease over structure. This recognition did not arrive as peace. It arrived as humiliation. He had believed himself strong because he could endure intensity. But intensity is brief. Anyone can endure pain for a moment. Discipline demands endurance without drama. No witnesses, no climax, just return. That day, the mentor finally spoke. Again, he said. But this time, the word was different. It was not a command. It was an invitation. The warrior bowed, not to the man, but to the process. Something subtle shifted. He stopped asking how long this would last. He stopped imagining a future where the weight would be removed. He placed his attention entirely on the act itself, the breath, the balance, the stillness between movements. Psychologists call this attentional anchoring. Monks called it presence. When attention stabilizes, anxiety weakens. When anxiety weakens, fear loses authority. Discipline, once resisted, becomes a stabilizing force rather than a burden. The warrior did not feel lighter yet, but he felt aligned. The gate had not opened, but it no longer felt hostile. It felt deliberate. Discipline still weighed on him, but the weight was no longer foreign. It was becoming familiar, even intimate, like a blade he was learning to carry correctly. He realized then why most people abandon the path at the beginning. Not because it is too hard, but because it strips away the stories they use to avoid themselves. That night, as he knelt alone, he understood the first truth of mastery. Discipline feels heavy only to the part of you that must die. And the mentor, watching from the shadows, knew the warrior was ready for the next lesson. With the ego quieted by repetition, the warrior would soon discover that silence itself was a weapon, and not everyone survives what it reveals. Silence changed its shape once the warrior stopped fighting it. At first, it had felt like neglect, an empty space where guidance should have lived. Now it felt deliberate, observant, alive. The mentor spoke even less than before. Days passed without a single correction, weeks without explanation. The courtyard remained the same. The rituals remained unchanged. But the warrior did not. Something inside him had slowed. His movements grew economical. His breath deepened without effort. His attention stopped scattering ahead of time. And in that quiet, a new kind of struggle began. Silence removed distraction, but it did not remove fear. It amplified it. When the body is no longer screaming, the mind finds its voice. Old memories surfaced, moments of failure, humiliation, comparisons he thought he had outgrown. The warrior realized how much of his previous life had been noise, designed to avoid stillness. In the ancient systems, this stage was expected. When external discipline stabilizes behavior, internal chaos emerges. Modern neuroscience confirms it. As habits become automatic, the brain frees cognitive space, and what fills that space is whatever has been suppressed. The warrior began waking before the bell, not from discipline but from unease. He would sit in the dim light before dawn, hearing nothing but wind and his own pulse. In that space, questions arose without language. Who am I without effort? Who am I when no one is watching? If discipline shapes me, what exactly is being shaped? The mentor watched these changes closely. One evening, without warning, he removed the warrior's blade and set it aside. "Train without it," he said, "no explanation." The warrior felt exposed. The sword had been identity, protection, proof. Without it, every movement felt vulnerable, balance faltered, confidence thinned. This was intentional. In Zen tradition, tools are removed to reveal dependence. In psychology, this is called de-identification, the separation of self from symbols of competence. Growth stalls when identity clings to instruments rather than skill. The warrior's frustration returned, but quieter now, sharper. Silence pressed in from all sides. There were no enemies to strike, no targets to conquer, only awareness. He began to notice how often his attention drifted, how the mind searched for stimulation, even during sacred practice. How impatience arose, not from difficulty, but from absence of novelty. The mentor finally spoke again, not as teacher, but as mirror. "Your fear is not of silence," he said. "It is of what remains when noise leaves." That night, the warrior understood something fundamental. Silence was not passive. It was confrontational. It stripped away narrative and left only truth. And truth does not argue, it waits. In modern terms, silence engages the prefrontal cortex, forcing self-regulation, emotional processing, and introspection. The ancients knew this without language. They called it facing the self. The warrior did not feel enlightened. He felt naked. And for the first time, he understood why silence was called a weapon, because it turns inward. As the warrior learned to remain still under silence, the next trial would demand something even harder, surrendering the last refuge of the ego. The warrior began to notice what silence did not forgive. It did not forgive impatience. It did not forgive distraction. It did not forgive self-deception. Every flaw surfaced eventually. During training, the smallest lapse in attention echoed louder than a shouted mistake. A wandering thought caused imbalance. A flicker of ego stiffened his breath. The absence of external correction made internal errors impossible to hide. This was the design. In the ancient system, silence was used not to calm the student, but to expose him. When there is no voice to follow, awareness must lead. And awareness, when undeveloped, reveals weakness with precision. The warrior felt old habits return, not as actions, but as impulses. The urge to rush, the desire to prove, the subtle fantasy of being seen as exceptional. He recognized them now, not as enemies to fight, but as signals to observe. Modern neuroscience explains this shift. When attention is trained consistently, the brain strengthens meta-awareness, the ability to observe thought without being consumed by it. The ancients called this watching the mind. Not controlling it, not silencing it, watching. This watching changed everything. Fear no longer arrived as panic. It arrived as sensation, tightness in the chest, shallowness in breath. Ego no longer shouted, it whispered. And whispers are easier to ignore. One afternoon, during stillness practice, something unfamiliar happened. Nothing, no resistance, no commentary, no impatience, just breath, posture, presence. The warrior did not celebrate this moment. He barely noticed it at all. But when the mentor passed behind him, he paused. Not to speak, not to correct, only to stand there. In the old teachings, this was acknowledgement, not praise, recognition. Silence had done its work. The warrior began to understand that discipline was changing location. It was no longer imposed from outside through rules and routine. It was forming inside as structure, as order, as instinct. Psychology calls this internalization. Behavior repeated long enough becomes identity. Effort dissolves into habit. Habit dissolves into character. Discipline stops feeling heavy at this stage, not because it is easier, but because resistance has weakened. The warrior still trained, still repeated, still endured monotony. But now the weight no longer pressed against him. It pressed through him. He moved differently, not aggressively, not carefully, precisely. His actions no longer sought validation. They sought alignment. Silence had sharpened him, and sharpened tools invite testing. That evening, the mentor finally spoke with intent. "Tomorrow," he said, "you will be broken." The warrior did not ask how. He did not ask why. For the first time since beginning the path, he trusted the process more than his understanding. He slept deeply that night, not because fear was gone, but because fear no longer commanded him. With silence forged into awareness, the next trial would demand the final sacrifice, the surrender of ego itself. Consistency is a mirror. It does not reward effort, it reveals truth. By the time the warrior's body had adapted, his ego began to suffer. His movements were now precise, his breath steady, his endurance unquestioned. From the outside, he appeared disciplined, perhaps even accomplished. And that was precisely when the resistance returned, sharper than before. This resistance did not arrive as laziness, it arrived as philosophy. Why this restraint? Why deny pleasure when life is already short? Why repeat what has already been mastered? The ego does not always rebel loudly. Sometimes it argues intelligently. The warrior watched others beyond the courtyard, men who trained when inspired, rested when tired, indulged without guilt. They laughed easily, spoke freely. Their lives appeared light. For the first time in many months, discipline felt heavier than it ever had. This was the low point. The ancient texts warned of it. When progress slows and clarity increases, the ego panics. It senses its authority weakening. And like any threatened ruler, it attempts negotiation. Modern psychology calls this identity threat. When a long-held self-concept begins to dissolve, the mind produces rationalizations to preserve it. The ego reframes impulse as freedom, comfort as wisdom, avoidance as balance. The warrior felt this pull deeply. One evening, he finally broke the silence. "Why?" he asked the mentor. "Why must strength feel like deprivation?" The mentor did not answer immediately. He studied the warrior as one studies weather, without judgment, without urgency. Then he spoke. "You confuse freedom with choice," he said, "and choice with strength." The words landed heavily. "Choice," the mentor continued, "is what binds the untrained mind. Each option drains attention. Each desire fragments presence. The ego celebrates choice because it keeps you distracted." He gestured toward the courtyard. Discipline removes choice so energy can return to the self. This was not comfort, it was exposure. The next morning, the trial began. No spectacle, no audience, just a task. Simple, repetitive, physically manageable, but endless. Lift, carry, place, return, lift, carry, place, return. No time limit, no metric of success, only continuation. Hours passed, then more. The warrior's muscles did not fail first. His pride did. There was nothing to prove, no refinement to admire, no mastery to display. Just effort without distinction. This was deliberate. In the ancient system, ego is not destroyed through humiliation, but through irrelevance. When there is no stage, the performer disappears. When there is no outcome to chase, the result-driven self collapses. Psychologically, this is extinction learning. Behaviors driven by reward weaken when reward is removed. The mind learns that seeking validation no longer produces relief. The warrior felt something inside him loosen, not dramatically but quietly. He stopped counting repetitions, stopped measuring progress, stopped imagining completion. He simply continued. For the first time, discipline was no longer something he did. It was something he inhabited. And in that inhabitation, the ego began to dissolve, not as pain, but as absence. He did not feel strong. He did not feel enlightened. He felt clear. Clear of urgency, clear of performance, clear of the self that needed to be seen. This was not victory, this was surrender. What remained after the ego's collapse would determine whether the warrior was merely disciplined or truly free. The trial ended without announcement. There was no final command, no signal of completion. The mentor simply took the tools from the warrior's hands and walked away. At first, the warrior felt disoriented. Without an ending, the mind searched for meaning. Without meaning, it searched for identity. But there was nothing to cling to, no performance to evaluate, no outcome to claim. And in that emptiness, something profound occurred. The voice inside him, the one that measured, compared, demanded, had gone quiet. Not silenced, not defeated, irrelevant. In ancient traditions, this moment was described as the empty vessel. Not hollow, but open. The ego had not been destroyed through force. It had been starved of its function. Without novelty, praise, or control, it had nothing left to protect. Modern neuroscience describes this state differently, but points to the same truth. When the brain's reward circuits stop dominating behavior, the prefrontal cortex gains stability. Attention becomes steady, identity loosens, the nervous system enters regulation. The warrior sat alone that evening, watching dusk settle over the courtyard. He noticed sensations he had never attended to before. The temperature of air against skin, the subtle rhythm of breath, the quiet precision of balance. These were not new experiences. They had always been there. But now nothing obstructed them. He understood then that discipline had not added anything to his life. It had removed what was unnecessary. Fear still existed, so did fatigue, so did doubt, but none of them ruled. The mentor joined him without sound. "You feel smaller," the mentor said. The warrior nodded. "Good," the mentor replied. "Now you can see. In the old systems, mastery was never about expansion of self, it was about reduction. Less noise, less craving, less identity. What remained was presence." The warrior realized something unsettling. His earlier suffering had not come from discipline itself, but from resistance to becoming ordinary. The ego fears invisibility. It wants distinction, even if that distinction is pain. But discipline, properly practiced, dissolves the need to be exceptional. It returns the warrior to what is real. The next days unfolded differently. Tasks remained unchanged, rituals persisted, silence endured. Yet the weight was gone, not because the work had become easier, but because there was no longer anyone inside arguing with it. Discipline now felt like gravity, unavoidable, neutral, supportive. The warrior no longer asked where the path was leading. He trusted that walking it was enough. This was the paradox the ancients guarded carefully. True freedom emerges not when effort ends, but when effort becomes selfless. When discipline no longer serves the ego, it serves the spirit. The mentor watched the warrior move through the courtyard with a stillness that required no correction. The final lesson approached, not as challenge, but as departure. With ego stripped away and presence stabilized, the warrior was ready to discover what waits beyond effort when the path itself begins to carry him. Transformation does not announce itself. It arrives quietly, between one breath and the next, between one step and another that feels no different from the last. The warrior did not wake one morning feeling enlightened. He woke as he always had, before the bell, before thought, before intention. And yet, something had shifted. There was no negotiation, no inner dialogue weighing effort against comfort, no calculation of mood, energy, or desire. His body rose as if guided by gravity. His hands moved through ritual as if remembering something older than memory. Discipline no longer felt imposed. It felt inevitable, like breath, like hunger, like the pull of the earth beneath bare feet. In ancient language, this state was called the return, not advancement, return. The warrior had not become more than human. He had become undivided. Modern neuroscience describes this as behavioral automation, when repeated practice migrates from conscious control to subcortical systems. Action flows without friction. Decision fatigue disappears. Willpower is no longer required because identity has aligned with behavior. But the ancients understood it more simply. The path carries those who stop resisting it. Fear still visited the warrior. Fatigue still appeared, pain still spoke, but none of them held authority. They were signals, not commanders. He trained not to conquer discomfort, but to coexist with it. His movements were calm, not cautious, not aggressive. Calm like a river that no longer debates its direction. The mentor watched him from a distance. He offered no correction because none was needed. Correction belongs to beginnings. This was continuity. One evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the courtyard, the mentor spoke for the last time. "You no longer need me," he said. There was no ceremony, no final lesson, no blessing. The mentor did not walk away dramatically. He simply stopped appearing. This too was intentional. In the ancient system, the teacher disappears when the student no longer requires external structure. The absence tests whether discipline has truly become internal or whether it collapses without supervision. The warrior noticed the absence immediately, and yet nothing changed. The rituals continued, the silence endured, the path remained. This was the confirmation. Discipline had moved from rule to reflex, from effort to expression. The warrior understood something the modern world forgets. Freedom is not release from structure, it is harmony with it. Chaos feels like freedom only to the untrained. Order feels restrictive only to the ego. True freedom feels quiet. It feels stable. It feels sufficient. The warrior no longer measured days by achievement. He measured them by presence, by how fully each action inhabited itself. This was mastery, not domination, not superiority, but coherence. Inner world ordered, outer movement precise. The path did not promise happiness, it promised alignment. And alignment, once established, carries you farther than motivation ever could. What remained was not an ending, but a continuation, where discipline dissolved into being, and the warrior stepped fully into what he had been shaped to become. In time, the warrior realized that nothing extraordinary would happen next, and that was the final lesson. There was no ceremony marking completion, no title granted, no recognition offered by the world beyond the courtyard stones. The path did not reward him with spectacle, it rewarded him with steadiness. Days unfolded with the same rituals, the same silence, the same effort, but without friction. The discipline that once felt like resistance now felt like rest. Not rest of the body, but rest of the mind that no longer argued with reality. He moved through the world with a quiet gravity, not withdrawn, not detached, present. When he spoke, words were economical. When he acted, motion was precise. When fear appeared, it was acknowledged and allowed to pass. Modern psychology would call this emotional regulation. Stress no longer hijacked attention. The nervous system returned to baseline quickly. The warrior's strength was not in his reactions, but in his recovery. The ancients called it mastery of self. One morning, as the warrior walked beyond the training grounds, he passed men who looked as he once had, restless, ambitious, distracted. They mistook urgency for purpose. They chased intensity, believing it would grant them meaning. He felt no judgment, only recognition. Discipline had not elevated him above others. It had returned him to himself. He understood now why discipline feels heavy at the beginning. It is not because it takes something from you, but because it reveals how fragmented you are. The weight is the cost of integration. The resistance is the ego resisting its own dissolution. Freedom, he realized, was never on the other side of discipline. It was inside it. The ancient system had done what it was designed to do, remove the illusion of control and replace it with alignment. Repetition rewired instinct, silence cultivated presence, suffering refined spirit, not through force, but through inevitability. The warrior no longer identified as a warrior. That identity, too, had been unnecessary. He was simply someone who walked the path, and the path, once resisted, now moved with him. This is the truth the modern world struggles to accept. Discipline does not confine the spirit. It clears the space in which the spirit can move freely. Ego builds walls in the name of freedom. Discipline removes them. The warrior did not escape discipline, he became it. And in becoming it, he found what he had been seeking all along, not pleasure, not success, not validation, but peace that does not depend on circumstances. Presence that does not require silence. Strength that does not need to be seen. This is why discipline feels heavy before it sets you free. Because what it carries away is everything that was never you. The path does not ask you to be strong. It asks you to stay until strength no longer needs to be chosen.